Hey everybody, what's up? Austin here. As you can see, I am not currently joined by my co-host Kramer. He'll be showing up later in the video. This is a new thing that we're trying with the format of the show where we do our spoiler-free general thoughts on the movie that we're covering in a separate piece of content. I think we're just going to call this like First Thoughts and release a spoiler-free just sort of like right after we see the film, we sit down, we do like 5 to 10 minutes each on our general thoughts without giving any, spoilers away. And then we will get together and do the full episode where we go more in depth. We've sort of been baking this aspect of the show into the full episode where we do like a 15 to 20 minute long spoiler free little kind of general thoughts business at the beginning of every episode, and then we do a full deep dive after that. And we just thought maybe we should just separate those, make those two different pieces of content. It gives us a little more freedom and flexibility in our week to week schedule, because obviously we don't live in the same state, and like when I see the movie I can just sit down and do 5 to 10 minutes on it right afterward. Same with Kramer, and then we can get together and go more in depth on our thoughts. So this week we are covering Edgar Wright's new film The Running Man, starring Glenn Powell and a whole bunch of other people. William H. Macy shows up in this thing. Michael Cera shows up in this thing. Josh Brolin. Coleman Domingo, one of my faves. I love Coleman Domingo. And my general thoughts, I just saw this last night. General thoughts, without giving anything away, I'm a fan of Edgar Wright films. Let me say that first and foremost. And kind of like a jaded indie music fan, I gotta be that guy who says, I'm a really big fan of the early stuff, right? I really like the Shaun of the Deads and the Scott Pilgrims versus the Worlds and I guess the whole entire series that he did with Sean Penn and, can't think of the other guy's name right now. I should know that, but I can't think of it right now off the top of my head. Guy who's going to be Hagrid in the new HBO Harry Potter show. But I appreciate Edgar Wright's style. I will say I really wanted to like this movie, and just in general, like there are a lot of things about this movie that I did like. I actually found myself really engaged in the stakes of the film. I found myself like feeling tense, as there are a lot of like really good moments of tension where a character is in a situation that you don't know how they're possibly going to get out of that situation. And I felt myself invested emotionally in that. I was on the ride that I think Edgar Wright wanted me to be on emotionally with this film. I was feeling the ups and downs, the moments where I needed to feel scared or tense. I was feeling that. What I don't think was quite working is this movie is a big satire, right? Like the comp that kept coming to my mind was Mike Judge's Idiocracy. It really feels that absurd, the way that they've created this like capitalist hellscape future. And I feel like, unlike Idiocracy, this movie that was very clearly like big, heavy, kind of shticky satire, the comedy wasn't landing for me. Like the tension was landing for me. The kind of thrill ride that I'm supposed to be on, the adrenaline ride that I'm supposed to be on, was mostly working for me. But the comedic moments in this film almost always fell flat for me. And also, like, the reason why I start off with Edgar Wright is because Edgar Wright is a director with a particular style. There's a way that he likes to shoot films, and specifically, there's a way that Edgar Wright likes to edit his films. Edgar Wright really likes a clever transition and really likes to, wipe the frame with something and bring, bring in the next scene in a way that sort of mirrors or echoes the last shot of the previous scene, and do a lot of layering in interesting ways. But I feel like more so than I do in his earlier work, I really felt his presence here in a bad way. Like, obviously you can feel the presence of Edgar Wright in a movie like Scott Pilgrim versus the World that is so heavily stylized, but it also feels like whoever was going to direct that movie, Scott Pilgrim versus the World, they should have done it that way. Even if it wasn't Edgar Wright, like that's the way to do that movie. It's just the right tone and the right style for that movie. And I feel the same way about Shaun of the Dead and a lot of the other Edgar Wright movies that really work for me. But this just sort of felt like Edgar Wright's maybe not the best or ideal director for this film. And Edgar Wright was sort of just doing Edgar Wright isms because I think the studio has a certain expectation of like, we're hiring you to do the thing. We're hiring you to do the Edgar Wright thing, so please just do that thing. And I could feel those moments just showing up in the edit, in transitions and stuff. And it almost always took me out of the story in a weird way where I was just like, oh, that's Edgar Wright sort of throwing in a quick little like, remember guys, Edgar Wright's directing this film. And I just don't know that it was necessary or that it actually helped this movie. Then going to Glenn Powell. Glenn Powell is obviously like, Hollywood really wants us to buy stock in Glenn Powell as our new modern movie star. He's the guy that they're selling to us as like the action star of the 2020s and possibly beyond into the 2030s. I like the story of Glenn Powell. I like that Glenn Powell is not a Nepo baby, that he's not just someone's kid or someone's nephew who was just handed the keys to the kingdom because of, familial proximity to producers and big studio heads. I like that Glenn Powell kind of worked his way up with bit parts for years and years and years in the industry before being given the shot that he's given right now. All that being said, I found Powell to be a little one note in this performance. I was hoping that he would show me something in this performance that I'd go, that's why we're buying Glenn Powell stock. That's why we're in. And there were flashes of that. There were flashes of moments where it's like, yeah, this guy's getting the tone right here. He's getting, like, he's charming. He can be funny in certain moments. But I found the character, and I don't know if this is a result of directing or writing, I found the performance to be a little one note and the character to be a little one note. And I'm not sure that he really went on a super satisfying arc or changed in any way. All that being said, we have to remember that the original person to play this part in this movie was Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I think it's safe to say that Glenn Powell is a more talented actor than Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think it's safe to say that, like, most modern working actors are better actors than Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's crazy. An entire generation just totally put up with the fact that, like, the biggest movie star in the world was a really, really bad actor. And we were all just like, but he's crazy buff and he's got a really unique voice. Like, even for Austrian people, not a lot of Austrian people sound exactly the way that guy sounds. And isn't that fun? Isn't that fun that we can just put Arnold Schwarzenegger in a movie and say that he's like an American cop from Houston named like Jack Dallas, and he just sounds the way he sounds, and we just did that. And so if we could do it for Schwarzenegger, I think we can do it for Glenn Powell. I don't think Glenn Powell has to be like much better than he is here in this movie in order for me to be okay with the Glenn Powellification of Hollywood lately. I think it's good enough. And I also think that, like, even though this film didn't fully work for me, it's kind of a film that, like, and I'll go into this more when I talk to Kramer about the movie. We'll go into it more depth, but I like what this movie wants to be about more than the execution of it. I like what the satire of the film is trying to say. I like the message that the film is trying to convey more than I enjoy the actual execution of it. And I think that the execution gets a little bit clunky with some of that stuff I mentioned earlier about Edgar Wright just sort of ham-fistedly pushing Edgar Wright isms into the edit of the film to remind the audience that Edgar Wright is directing this. And I don't know that it always wound up helping. I think it actually sometimes kind of fought what the tone of the film wanted to be. But we'll go into more detail on all of that in the full breakdown. Those are just my spoiler-free thoughts. I really think this is a movie that will work for a lot of people. It didn't fully work for me, but if you're a person who this film worked for, I get it. Like, I think there's enough there to enjoy. And I could see this movie actually maybe taking on a life of its own later on down the road with people who really, really like it and really think it's like one of the better Edgar Wright films in the latter half of his career. But we'll see. And now I'm going to pass it over to my co-host, Kramer. Take it away, bud.
Here are my general thoughts about The Running Man from 2025. First of all, I had a lot of fun with this movie. I thought there was a lot of stuff to really love, a lot of great action sequences, a lot of fun in the movie. I think this is a movie, first of all, that you should see in the theater. There's a lot of really cool, fun action set pieces that will really keep you entertained. And I think the best thing that you can do, though, is go in with the right expectations. I think my expectations were a little too high for this movie. And that's my own fault. I like to go in with low expectations so that usually I like movies and my expectations are exceeded. But for this movie, I love Edgar Wright. I love Glenn Powell. I loved the premise. I loved the trailers. Thought the trailers were cut amazingly well. And so I just had my expectations were a little too high. And so they weren't completely met. That doesn't mean I didn't like the movie. I liked a lot of the movie. I thought there were some really great things in it. I was totally with the movie for the first act and the second act. I was in it. I loved where it was going. I loved the road aspect of the movie. I loved, uh, all the characters, all the interactions. I was having a lot of fun with it. But then the third act, it kind of lost me in the third act, and it started getting a little too heavy-handed with its message. Kind of started, even though I agree with the message and I see what they're going for, because they started getting a little bit more serious about it, it kind of took me out of the movie. And I think if you kind of continue to keep the tone the way that it was, I think the message hits a little bit harder. And also, it just kind of there were problems with the tone overall in this movie. Edgar Wright is really great at balancing tone, and this one I think was just a little bit off. I wasn't sure exactly if I should think that something was really, really funny or if I should take it really seriously. And in the end, it seemed to get a little too serious. So I think that was something. There was something wrong with that. I also think the movie was too long. I think they should have cut it down a little bit. I feel like they could have cut it down, and it still would have had the same impact and would have felt a little bit quicker, which is kind of funny because Edgar Wright, he's he's a great director for editing. He'll do things quickly, but this one just was a little bit slower paced. And I'm sure it was intentional, but I think it could have been a little bit quicker. I think it could have even been a little bit faster. Kind of similar to some of his other films that he's done, but this one it seemed to be a little bit slower. Not horrible, but good to realize that it's over 2 hours, and I think it could have been just under 2 hours and would have felt a little bit better. Um, and so, like I said, I kind of got lost in the ending, and I think Edgar Wright kind of has a problem with endings in some ways, and I'm sure me and Austin will get into that more. But his last few movies I've seen, I've haven't loved the endings. Some of them have been good, but many of them I've kind of just been like, okay. Like with The World's End, I really did not love the ending of that movie. It was kind of the same, but I really just got completely lost in the third act of that movie. But still love Edgar Wright, everything that he's done. I also I really love Josh Brolin. He's an amazing actor. I think he did really well in this movie, but every scene was stolen by Coleman Domingo, in my opinion. Every scene that he was in, it was stolen by him. I loved him in this movie. I thought he was great. I wish we had more of him, and I wonder, would it have been better if he was the main antagonist instead of Josh Brolin? Because in the 1987 movie, which is very different, this movie is an adaptation of the book, not a remake of the movie. And in the book, in the 1987 movie, Killian, the character of Killian, is the host of the show, and they kind of combine the two characters. In this movie, they're two separate characters: the host, and then there's Killian. And I thought it might have actually been better if Coleman Domingo was this bad guy. I wonder what that would have been like. Just because he's such a fun actor and the way that he plays his character was so interesting. And so I think, oh, maybe that would have been better, but not the worst thing. Just kind of something I have been thinking about, if that maybe would have been better. But overall, some great action sequences, great action directing, really fun stuff. Glenn Powell is really good. I think that Edgar Wright did some really fun stuff. But if you go in knowing that, the third act is probably not going to be the best, I think you'll really love it. I think, again, going in low expectations is always good for movies. So that's what I would recommend. I would recommend go seeing this in the theater. It's a really fun time. It's a really good movie. Me and Austin are going to get into the full breakdown later. We're going to try this new format. Hopefully you like it. Let us know what you think. But next week is going to be Wicked for Good, and we'll look to see you there. Bye-bye.